traffic classification problem have been sponsored by the RDO New Delhi. He has authored a book on computer graphics. He is a reviewer for Journal of Information Security and Applications, International Journal of Machine Learning and Cybernetics, Multimedia Tools and Applications, IEEE Signal Processing. It's a great honor for us to have you with us today, sir. On behalf of the management of St. Joseph Engineering College and the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at SPLC, I extend a warm and hearty welcome. Before we proceed with today's session, here are a few guidelines for participants. You are requested to mute yourself during the session. We request all participants to ask questions only towards the end of the sessions. This is to inform you that the session will be recorded. Without further delay, I now call upon Dr. Chandramouli to take over the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am, for the nice introduction. And thanks to the management and the organizers, particularly Dr. Usha madam, who has been constantly in contact and updating each and every activity related to the FDP. And I see all the 4 days have been done very efficiently by the renowned speakers. And I hope that I will not disappoint you today in the last day. Let me start with the presentation. The topic is ensemble learning. Before we start, let us see the first slide that talks about bias variance trade-off. This word is popular in the field of statistics, and machine learning or the data science is inevitably backed by the statistics when we have to know about this term. In general, you have seen in the last 4 days, different speakers have given different types of models that are lying in machine learning. Either it can be supervised or in the unsupervised mode or in the reinforcement learning mode. For some given data, you develop a model with respect to the problem in hand, that is either a classification problem or a clustering problem or any sort of an estimation problem or a function approximation. Whatever the problem is, you have different models available in machine learning, and using those models, we develop with the available given data set, we try to develop a new model. So when you do develop such a new model for the data set in hand with you, the model may not be accurate enough, and it it has some error. Means the model, once you test the model, it may not perform 100%, it gets some error. That error in any model basically depends on 3 components. That is, one is a bias, the second one variance, and the third one irreducible error. Means we cannot develop any model that is 100% accurate. There will be a slight marginal difference between that accurate 100% milestone and the accuracy of the model being developed. And no model can escape from this part. There will be certainly a delta portion of the inaccuracy exists in any model. So that is inevitable. So we do not pay much attention here. But the other 2 components we can think of to improve the performance. So the relation between these 3 and the error is basically given as error is the summation of all these 3 components, that is the bias and the variance and the irreducible error. So what do you mean by bias? Okay, so basically it is defined as how much on an average the predicted values are different from the actual value. Means you develop some model, that model predicts certain things, and you have some error, you have some actual values available. So when you calculate the difference, you get some error. So that error can be considered as some bias. And you can take root mean square, whatever you statistical measures to estimate the error. So when you have a high bias error, then it basically leads to underperforming. The model is not going to understand the data. That is what the interpretation we can make it from the bias. I hope that I am audible to all of you and the screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
We are
sir.
hearing.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Gaurav. So the next one is variance. Variance talks about how the predictions made on the same observation different from each other. This is what basically the variance means. You have the distribution of the data, how much the deviation is from the mean of the data we generally call variance. And when you have a high variance, then it becomes a overfit, and that leads to poor performance. Overfit generally means when you have a, let us say, we shift to this. Is this screen visible? OneNote?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It's visible, sir.
I'll be shifting between these two, OneNote and the PPT. So when you have some data plotted over XY plane, let us say you have some points like this of class 1, and you have some points like this. And your model is going to predict and find a nonlinear decision boundary by exactly beautifully separating these points. Let us assume like this. So when your model is able to give this sort of a distribution, the class separation between the points separated, that's fine. But what this is, we call it as overfitting. Means this model is given too much of information about the data so that it could able to penetrate like this and make a boundary. And this model cannot, if your data is further increasing, then this model may not be sufficient to fit the newly coming data. This is what basically overfitting. Or in otherwise, we also call, once you have some model that is being developed using some training set. Okay. And when you test this model for the training set, it gives a good accuracy. The accuracy is good for training set, but the accuracy is average for test set or below average. This also we call it as overfitting. Means the model has been learned with respect to some portion of the data, that call it as a training set, and it is able to predict only for that particular data alone. But if you have more data, some unknown data is being given to the model, it is not able to perform well. Means for example, like in a class, if you teach, since most of the people, participants or faculty, if we teach something in the class and if we ask the same thing exactly without any change, naturally the performance, the students will answer that particular question very well. But if you make slightly a twist in the question or a problem, then people who are really understood the concept can answer, and the rest may have a problem. So this is what called, means whatever you taught, it is able to understand and able to give you the result, and whatever is not known, it is not performing well. This sort of a scenario, we call it as overfitting of the model. So when you have a high variance, so naturally this particular model, whatever you have it, will get high variance, and that leads to overfitting and the poor performance you get when the data is been continuously increasing over a period of time. So there will be a trade-off between, there should be a trade-off between the bias and the variance. So the trade-off can be done either at two ways. Either you decrease the bias at the cost of high variance, or you decrease the variance at the cost of high bias. So how to do this? Either way, if you choose how to achieve this is the topic of the day. That is ensemble learning. And what it does is it will take the second model, preferably most of the occasions, it will do reduce the variance at the cost of little high bias or with a manageable bias. This is what ensemble learning will do. So with this brief introduction about the necessity of the ensemble learning, we go to the actual what that is. So this is what I repeat, the any model will have certain error that can be compounded as the three components like bias, variance and the irreducible error. And you should not have a high bias error that ultimately leads to underperforming the model, and you should not have a high variance error that ultimately leads to underperforming the model, and you should not have a high irreducible error that ultimately leads to underperforming the model. So this is what
Hello, sir. Yeah. So we are not able to hear you. Hello, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, there was some unanticipated network issue came. Is the screen visible now?
No, sir. It's set to be presented. We are able to see your screen, but not. Yes, sir. Now it's visible.
Yeah. Which point I was disconnected, whether this slide I was discussing it. Shall I continue?
It's visible, sir. You can proceed.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
basically, when you see this graph, as the complexity of the model increases, the training sample error will gradually decrease. As you increase the complexity more and more to the model, it gets reduced. But for the test data, it starts reducing the error to some extent when the complexity is being increased, and after certain time the more complexity you add, the test samples again will start generating more error. So you have to see the point where you can, this is what we do it in ensemble learning to reduce the error, or otherwise we call the trade-off between the bias and the variance will be established in a perfect manner. Okay, so how do we increase the complexity of a model? When you say simply a model complexity increases, means how to add the complexity. Suppose I developed a model with some limited, some features, say of around 4 features I have, and with that 4 features, I developed a model. Later, if I want to add more complexity, I can increase more and more features, so that by adding more features, you can get the complexity get increases, or you can combine some weak classifiers to get a complex model. That's what basically the ensemble learning will do. So with that brief introduction, let us move to the ensemble learning, what it is. It's a machine learning technique, and what it does is it combines several base models in order to produce one optimal predictive model. Base model means you can choose any model. Suppose you have different models like linear regression, logistic regression, decision trees, neural networks, support vector machines, k-nearest neighbor. If you just to name anything that is considered as a well-established model, all these things we call the base models. So you can choose according to the problem, what are all the base models you want to work on, you can select it, and you work on that particular data, and then combine those predictions to produce another optimal model. So that this way you can improve the performance of the predictive model, and also that improves the accuracy. I'll just see with an example. Suppose someone wants to buy a car. Okay. So whenever you start purchasing, want to purchase a car, so what we generally do, we take opinion of different people. Am I right? So what we do is, I take a review from my friend, say review 1 I take. And then also I take 2 friends' reviews. Suppose I want to buy some car of some model, and assume that there are 2 friends of mine has that own the car. So I take a review of them from both of the people, and then I take some opinion from different other people. What do you? And then also I can explore in the internet about that particular car and the different types of cars, whatever you have, and then also I make some comparison. Right? So to buy a car, we are going to take different opinions. Let us say even opinion 1, opinion 2, like that we take. And you know that all the people or all the sources is somewhat reliable. Say your friend, you can assume that he will be correct 70% as per you. Okay. And the second person, let us say he is always correct at 75%. and I take opinion from a different set of people or from the different community. Let us say they are correct for 60%. And again, another one, let us say they are correct at 70%. And when I explore it, I will be getting correct, say some percentage, 70. And a comparison I do, let us say one more 70%. So all these are 100%, they are not true, but to some extent they are true, closer to the 100%. So when you want to make an accuracy, so before purchasing a car, I made this much of research, and then combining this research, I will make it to an output decision. What is the accuracy, or what is the best way, what is the best I can go for, either to buy a particular car or not. Okay, so that we can measure it as 1 minus the 70% multiplied by all those estimates, whatever you made. So this is equal to 1 minus 0.7 times 0.75 times 0.6 times 0.7 times 0.7 times 0.7. So some value you get. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 7. Let me use the calculator. 0.7 times 0.75 times 0.6 times 0.7 and another 0.7 and another 0.7 leads to 0.1048. So 1 minus 0.108045. So this is equal to 89%, 89.8919 something. So approximately 90% they are giving a fair reply to me to make a decision whether I have to go for a particular car or not. So individually their predictions are this much, but combination of all these will be giving 90%. This is what the complete ensemble learning we do. All these are, let us assume that different models on the same particular data. So I want to buy a car of some model X. On this particular model, they gave different opinions and they are correct 70% or 75% or 60%. I have some basic knowledge. With this knowledge, I made some assumptions and assume that these are all correct up to this much. But when I make a combination of this, that will lead to 90%. So I can think of, I can go and buy this model because it is almost 90% accuracy is giving. Means whether this 90% accuracy will help me in making a decision to go for model X or model Y. So if I do the same thing for model Y, let us say I get 95% and model Z 98%, then I can think of, so model X I got a 90%, model Y 95%, and model Z 98%. So I can make the decision that this will be the better because it is closer to the accuracy. This model will be much efficient for my ride or for my journeys or whatever, by the reason I purchase a car. This is what the ensemble learning will do. So the basic idea is the ensemble models in machine learning, they operate on a similar idea and combine the decisions from the multiple models to improve the overall performance. So individually, they are not giving the best accuracy, but when you combine them, they give the best performance. So I hope that I am audible, and shall I proceed to the next slide, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
So this is what total taxonomy of ensemble learning. You have some simple techniques like voting, averaging, weighted averaging, ranking, all these are preliminary or trivial techniques of ensemble learning. Then you have some advanced techniques that include stacking, blending, bootstrap sampling, bagging and boosting. And you have some algorithms, ensemble learning models on bagging. Mainly you have a meta estimator or the random forest. And also you have some algorithms on boosting, that is a gradient boost method or extreme gradient boost method or ADA boost method or different other versions of the GBM, CAD boost. So we'll see overall maximum how much we can cover with some demo. We'll see in this today session. So let us start with the preliminary technique, that is voting. So what voting will do, you have some training set, and from the training you have it some different classifiers, say C1, C2 and so on up to CM, and each and every classifier will give some predictions P1, P2 and PM, and overall over this you make some voting. So how you make some voting, it is left to the individual developer in choosing the voting mechanism, and based on that voting mechanism you can make a final prediction. So let us say you have 5 models, and model 1 has given in a scale of 5, 0 to 5, model 1 has given 5, model 2 has given 4, model 3 has given 4, model 4 has given 5, and model 5 has given 5. I mean, these are all the scores the model has given over certain data in the scale of 0 to 5. So with this, now you are voting, you can think of in either way. Means you can say first one, majority, how many are voted by the for a particular score, how many they got a particular score. If you see here, majority has given for 5, so you can go for 5, or you can go for maximum voting, that is again same like what is the maximum score they got, again 5. So in this way, or someone take a median. So if you take a median, the scores will be written as 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, and again the median becomes 5. So all these are different variants of the voting method. Okay. So this is the simplest method to combine the models of individual models which gave some accuracy, and you are combining those things into a strong model. Suppose you take averaging, the other simplest technique. Then what you do is you take the average of this. So 5 plus 4 plus 4 plus 5 plus 5 or 5. So 15 plus 8, 23 by 5. That leads to 5 4 20 and 5 6 4.6 your combined model accuracy. Or sometimes you can go for weighted average. Means for every model you give some weights. Let us say W1 you give a weight of 0.2, W2 again 0.2, W3 0.3, W4 0.3, and W5 say 0.2 and 0.1. So the weighted average becomes 0.2 times of 5 plus 0.2 times of 4 plus 0.3 times of 4 plus 0.2 times of 5 plus 0.1 time of 5. So whatever the value comes here, that will be the weighted average. So all these are the simplest methods you can choose in voting. So this is what either voting or averaging or weighted averaging or ranking with respect to some criteria you choose. All these are the very simple methods to combine the performance of the different classifiers and get the final prediction based on the combination. So this is what the predictions made by the different models. You combine it and give the final prediction. So how you are combining is the only matter here, whether you take the median or you take the majority or you take a weighted average or you take a simple average or any other statistical operation you define it on these predictions that will eventually come with some final result, which may be either one of these results or a better of these. Okay, so this is the simplest ensemble learning what one can do. And the next one, if you see, is stacking. And before we go with the stacking and other methods where I promise it that I will show some demo. Let us see the IRIS data set, which is one of the most popular data set in the machine learning community. And people, whoever is new to the machine learning, they first start on working on this data set because of its simplicity, as well as it has different features. So this is basically a flower data set introduced by Robert Fisher. Also, it is called as Fisher's IRIS dataset. It is a multivariate dataset, means you have more number of features available, not one or two features. You have more than one feature is available. So there are three different species of iris. This is a type of flower, and they are called Setosa, Virginica, and versicolor. These are the three different classes of flowers. And you have a different flower images, and from the flower images they have extracted four different features. One is called sepal length, sepal width, petal length, and petal width. So these are the four features. Using these four features, you are going to classify, given a particular combination of sepal length, sepal width, petal length, and petal width, what type of flower is it? Either it belongs to the category of Setosa, or it is of a Virginica or versicolor. The machine learning model has to predict. So this is a typical example of a Setosa where the petals are very long. Okay, and this is the example of a versicolor, and this is an example of a Virginica. So the data set is basically, you have 50 items for each category. So totally 150 categories are there. Let me go to, so I use basically for machine learning models, the Anaconda Navigator, which comes with all the different sort of libraries you have. So once you have an Anaconda Navigator in your system, when you install it, you automatically get a Jupyter Lab, Jupyter Notebook, and you get a PowerShell prompt, and you get a Qt console, you get a Spider, you can get Orange, as well as you can get RStudio. So it means that this indicates that even if you are proficient at R, you can link with R. Otherwise, you can write other things are all directly. You can write the simple Python code. So I use the Jupyter Notebook. This is what a Jupyter Notebook like. And let me just load the iris. So in order to work with Jupyter for developing machine learning, we need to have certain libraries to import. One is basically for all mathematical things, you need to have a library called NumPy, where most of the mathematical things which are functions are available in this file. And Pandas will help you in framing the data in the form of a data frames. And the Seaborn and Matplotlib, these are used for making different plots. So I'll just run this. This is an interpreter. It runs one by one. So this star here indicates that it is in process. Usually the first command will take a little bit time to set the, yeah, the one has come, means this is executed. And I have my iris data available in this folder. So I am reading that iris, and before further procedure, let me show how this iris data will look like in the CSV file. I hope that you could able to see all this.
Yes, sir. It is visible, sir.
Yeah. So this is what the sepal length, sepal width, petal length, and petal width features, and finally the category, the label, the species to which it belongs to. So totally you have here 150 tuples of information with 50 for setosa and 50 for versicolor and 50 for virginica. So all these are basically features. Yesterday or the day before yesterday, they were telling the other speakers, the features are basically a numerical attribute values over this particular under every attribute. So you have a features, and what we are going to see is with these numerical values, we are going to identify the species. So some unknown, say, combination of these four is being given. We are going to, the machine learning model is going to say whether it belongs to which category. This is what the whole task is. So iris, so the data I have read._csv is a command available in pandas library. So using pandas imported as a PD. So I use this is only an alias names for the corresponding packages. So pd.read_csv will read the CSV and get it stored in iris variable. The head iris.head will give me the first 5 rows of information. If you simply say iris, you get the complete total information you will get. But I want only to see the first 5, I'll get the 5. Similarly, if you give iris.tail, you get the last 5. If I change it to tail and execute, so I'll get, I told 150 elements are there starting from 0. So you'll get the last 5 of the species virginica. Now what I do here is I'll group, this is the final attribute column is the species. What I do is I will group by the species and take the aggregation I am making, means under every category I am the mean and median. Okay. So in the first category, setosa, for the sepal length, what is the mean? For the sepal length, what is the median? Similar means for every feature, I am going to, for every category, I am calculating the mean and median and getting displayed. So whenever you have the data is better understood by statistical measures as well as the statistical distributions. So if you plot it over a plane or if you over a hyperplane, so how the data is spread over in that particular plane, so that you can think of which model can be, whether you need to have a linear model or you need to go for a non-linear model. You can make a decision based on the statistical distributions and statistical features. So I take the mean and median of every feature for every class, and then here I calculate the standard deviation. So I get the standard deviation for every category. And what I am doing is here I am showing this in the form of a box plot using the functions available in the Seaborn as well as in the Matplotlib. So this when you execute, you get and for every feature you get for all the three classes the different feature. This particular type of plot we call the distribution of the data is being divided into quartiles. The first quartile, the minimum quartile, the maximum quartile, intermediate quartiles, like that we represent in statistics. The same plot you can get it through in Excel also. We call it as a box plot. So I'm just making a grid of 2 cross 2. So in this first figure is the combination, the distribution of the data for the attribute sepal length, and here the sepal width and the petal length and petal width. Now what I am doing is I am making a histogram distribution and to see how the data is spread. Okay. So this command will help me. If you see the sepal length, the first feature you have overlapping. So for all the different classes, if you see, there is a overlapping of the data is there. So the sepal length feature alone is not sufficient enough to categorize these three flavors, these three classes. Similarly, if you see sepal width, this is even much more worse than sepal length. There is so much of overlapping of the data happens in the sepal width. So what one can able to understand from this distribution is, if you do with these features are not good enough to categorize or discriminate the different classes of the data. And if you see the petal length, you can see the first one, that is the blue color, setosa is well separated, whereas versicolor and virginica, they have it overlapping. So if I take a petal length alone, I can make this categorization so that I can draw a line here and separate the setosa with the versicolor and virginica. And similarly, if you see petal width, here also I can make the same discrimination. Petal length and petal width, using these features, I can separate the setosa from the rest of the two classes. So this is what even you can see from the image also. The petal length and petal width, it is quite bigger for setosa compared to the versicolor and virginica. These are the observations we can make. All these functions and plots will help us in understanding the data. Okay. So similarly, the same thing, if you, here is another one graph, the scatter plot between the sepal length and the sepal width. So how complex the data is. Here also you can see the data is much clustered between the versicolor and virginica, but a little bit setosa you can able to make the difference. But what we need is not separating setosa from these two. We want every class should be well separated. So in order to do this, we can think of developing some model to establish, to create it over the data set so that all the three categories can be separated. So the observations one can make by looking at the basic distribution is that petal length we can separate the iris setosa. Using sepal length or sepal width, we can't do anything because it is all messed up and we cannot separate the flowers. In petal width, iris setosa is not distributed properly. So we use the petal length as a feature to separate at least iris setosa. But what we need is not only separating the iris setosa, but we have to separate even versicolor as well as virginica. So for that, what we have to do is we have to think of developing some models over this data. Let me show all the complete data available. So when I say iris alone without head or without tail, I'll get all the complete information, 150 rows. Again, I am not audible, ma'am.
You're audible, sir.
Okay, fine. So I'll get the complete information when you simply say iris. So you can further expand this. So you get all the 150 rows and the 5 columns of the data you will get. Okay. So with this basic information, we are going to see this data set only in every model, how every model is going to operate on this particular data set to achieve the classification accuracy. So with this, let me start with the stacking, which is basically one of the advanced technique as I mentioned here. So what stacking will do is it makes predictions from the multiple models to build a new model. In fact, if you see any of these, I'll be repeating the same statement. Every technique here, whether it is stacking or blending or sampling or bagging or anything, they apply different models and then combine those models' individual performances in order to make a better performance. Okay. So the stacking also does the same. So the new model that is built will be used for making the predictions on the test data set. So the typical steps involved, what we do is we split the training data into some n parts and fit a base model on n minus 1 parts and make predictions on the nth part. And then we fit the base model on the whole training data set. And using this, we make predictions on the test set. And we repeat the process, these three steps, step 2 to step 4, with another model that results in another set of predictions. Like this, we take as many models as we have and we develop, we'll combine those predictions into one single model. So this is what the diagram says. I have the training data. From the training data, I give it to n different models, and n models will make n predictions. And then we develop a model by combining these predictions and make a final prediction. So what here it will do is, so I have the training data available. This is, let us assume that this is my training data. And here, what I do is the first step, I'll divide it into n parts like this. So usually we do it 10 parts. So what I'm trying to explain is a k-fold cross validation. Means what it does is it will divide the data where k is 10. So it will divide the data into 10 equal parts. And what it does is, after dividing, so this is your training data. So this 10 parts, what we do is, we keep this part away, and using these 9 parts, means from 2 to 9, we take and fit a model. Okay. And then we take this part to test the model. Similarly, in the second experiment, we keep the second part away and use 1 and 3 to 10 parts to predict the model, and then use the second part to test it. So like this, you repeat the experiment such that at every experiment iteration, you keep one part as a separate, and you see the rest of the parts and develop a model and test the model with the unknown part. So this is what let us say, my first model is a decision tree. So in the decision tree, I divide the data into 10 parts, and then this is what we do. So the k-fold cross validation, let us say for k equal to 5, I take like this. So at one part, in the first experiment, so
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. इधर इधर है, but he is not able to listen.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, sir. You're audible, sir.
Okay. I'm very sorry, the participants. Last 4 days, there was no issue, but only have a severe issues. I think that why I'm frequently disconnected. Hope that the screen is also visible.
No, sir. Screen is not visible, sir. Yeah, it says presentation, but it is not visible. Or your network is-
Now,
No, sir. As of now, no. Your screen is visible, sir, now.
yeah, thank you. So, yeah, so we divide the data set into the training data set into k parts, and we repeat the experiment k times. Every experiment we keep a train model with the k-1 parts, and the one part that is left
Sir?
will use it for prediction. So, in this way, yes, ma'am.
Sir, your screen, you are not shared the screen. I can only see your screen, but we are not sure what you are showing, sir. Yes, sir.
See, here I could see that.
Yes, sir. I can see.
Here I could see that. Yeah. Can I proceed?
Yes, sir. You can proceed, sir.
Yeah. So what we do is this, in this way we repeat the experiment taking one model. So we get 10 times we predict on the training data sets, and using all these predictions we make the 11th time prediction, and then we take some other model. Let us say next I take the k nearest neighbor, and similarly over the for the k nearest neighbor also I divide the using this k-fold cross validation. I make the experiment run for 10 times using this knn, and I make it 10 predictions, and with those predictions help I'll try to give a prediction on the test data set. Similarly, if I take another model like let us say logistic regression, you get a distribution like this, where you get 10 predictions on the 10 parts of the data, and then we make a prediction on the test data. So like this, this is what the steps here says. So you split the data into 10 parts, and then fit a model on the 9 parts and make a prediction on the 10th part. Then like this, you fit the model on the whole data set. Means you repeat this for all the parts such that in every time you get a prediction on the every part. Then using this model, the predictions are made on the test data set. This is all for a particular model. Then you change the base model. First you do it with a decision tree, then you do it with a KNN, then you do it with a logistic regression. Like this, you repeat it as many models as you can. And then finally, you try to give the predictions to the entire model. And here you can choose this model. Either you can choose any of these models or a complete different model that is left to the developer. Means I can, for example, if I take a decision k nearest neighbor and logistic regression, I can use either decision tree or a KNN or the logistic regression, or I can use a support vector machine or a neural networks, any model you can choose for the final prediction. So blending is the next technique, where here also you use the same sort of a stacking, but the only difference is that in the training data itself, we'll make a small subset, will make it. So if you take this as your training data set, this training data set, I divide it into two parts. One part I say this is how I divide the training data set. So this is my training set now, a new training set, and this part I call it as a validation set. So again, over and again I get a test set available. So what we do is I take a model, let us say decision tree. So using this training data, I'll feed a model and then make a prediction on the validation set. And using the prediction, I'll like to make a final predictions on test samples. So then I take a KNN, again on this data, we try to fit and then use this validation set for prediction, and then using these predictions the accuracy of the test set. Like this I will do. So the basic difference between stacking and blending is, in the stacking you divide the whole training set into some k folds, and k minus 1 you feed the model using training set, and the k one part you use it for prediction. Like this you repeat, and then finally with those predictions you test the accuracy of the test set. Whereas in blending you use the whole training set, let us say this whole. So in general we take a 75% of the data for training and 25% of the data for testing. So within the 75%, again 75% of the data of the 75 you use it for training, and 25% of the 75 you use it for validation. So validation set is only used in blending to make the model predictions. And these predictions you are going to take accuracy on the test, like use as many models as you can and get different predictions. Individually, these predictions will be given.
Hello, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
So your voice is breaking, sir.
Provide the secure watermark embedding and development procedure. That was my first objective is designing a secure method for
There is another voice. Is somebody has
Mr. Gaurav,
unmuted now?
mute yourself. Mr. Gaurav, kindly mute yourself. Mr. Gaurav. Gaurav sir, kindly mute yourself. Yes, sir, you can continue.
Yeah. Am I audible, ma'am, now?
Yes, sir, now you are audible, sir. Logged out. Log out. Okay. Technical. ಫೋನ್ ಕೂಡ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಇವಾಗ. Sir, you have logged out from the session. Okay, okay, sir. Okay.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, madam.
Yes, sir.
Is the screen visible, ma'am?
Yes, your screen is visible, sir. Sir, but yes, sir. Jupyter screen is visible, sir. Now.
Yeah. So the basic difference between the stacking and blending is that in the blending, we divide the training data set into training and validation, and the rest of the process is the same. Then the third concept is bagging. Basically, what it does is it combines the results of the multiple models to get a generalized result. And the models will give. So here, if you see the same models, if you use the for the same data set, naturally all these models will behave in a similar way. So you don't get much improvement in the final output prediction when you use either of these models like stacking or blending. If you choose it, then they are going to see the same set. So if I use Iris, you get same since the models are using the same training set, they behave in a similar way. You don't get much deviation in the performance. The same I will show with the Jupyter in for the stacking. So again, I'm using importing the NumPy and Pandas libraries, and I'm reading now for a change. I'm reading a different data set that is called as a Titanic data set, where you have 25 columns available, and the data shape means the whole data. If you want to see, this is 891 rows of data with 25 attributes you have. And in general, most of the times when you are working with the machine learning models or some data, you get some sort of a null values in between. So always it is advisable to check whether is there any null value for any. So these are all the features or the attributes I have. So for any of these attributes, is there any null available? You can check it. So if it is there, then you can replace those null values with the suitable values. Then what I am doing is in this data, I have the different sort of attributes I have, and the survived is the one. This is the label of the class, means the final categorization. So you can in the Titanic based on the different features whether you are surviving or not. So it is a two-class problem. So 0 representing that there is no survival, and 1 means you have survived. So what I am doing is I am making that from the data set, I am separating the target samples from the rest of the samples. So for that you can say data.drop, the corresponding label of the attribute, and axis equal to 1 representing the whole column you want to drop it. So you can drop it, and you take from the same data the drop after you drop the survived, whatever the 24 columns are there, that is available in X, and from the same data survived you extract it and put it into Y. Now if you see what is there in X, so earlier your whole data starts with survived, age, fair, and so on. Now X contains age, fair, and the rest of the things. And this is only the index, not the class. So you can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, representing the different tuples of information. So totally I have 891 rows and 24 columns, and Y containing the attribute survey. So all the Y's are 890 rows, 891 rows. I have the values either 0 or 1. So the shape of the Y81 comma indicates that it is a one vector of information. So with this, from the given data set, we separate the data with every label separate and the other labels separate. Now we use scikit-learn, and then we use a train test split. So what it does is, when we have a lot of information available in the form of 890 rows we have, so we want to use this data into training data as well as the test data separately. So for that you no need to do it manually, but you can use a train test split. So I use that, and when you say stratify equal to Y, means that the default option, this what it says is that 75% of the data is used for training and 25% of the data is used for testing. So I use that train test that is available in the package, and then I use the train test split on X as well as Y. The random state is some value greater than 0, indicates that you randomly select the data for splitting the training and test sets. So training X contains 75% of the 891 rows, and testing X will get 25% of the 891 rows. Similarly, whichever rows are selected, those corresponding things are labels are available in training Y, and whichever is used for test, those corresponding things are available in test Y. So using these things, the train test split will give. So when I run, so 75% of the 891, 668 rows are used for training, and the rest of the 223 rows are used for testing. Similarly, whatever the 668 rows are selected, those 668 outputs are also put it into the train Y, and these 223 rows, the correct outputs are available in test Y. So shall I proceed further?
You can proceed, sir.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So what I'm using, as I said, I use the 3 different models. One is logistic regression, k-nearest neighbor, and the other one decision tree classifier, to work on this Titanic data set. So what is I'm just using function and the model predictions that will this is user defined function that will take the first parameter as the model, means whatever the model I want to use, and the training X, training Y, which is used for training, and the testing the X. These are what we get it from the train test split. And using this model, I use a model.fit. We are trying to fit the model using any samples and the corresponding labels. And then once the model is fit, you are going to predict the model over the training test first. Also use the prediction on the test set. And what you are returning is this prediction training and prediction test you are returning. So this is a common function I define it so that I can use it for all these three models. And first I am using the decision tree classifier to test the model. So decision tree classifier, I used it by putting some random state, some random value, and then I am predicting the model predictions using the, so I am calling this user defined function model predictions by passing the decision tree classifier and the trainings X, training 1 and the tests X sets. So with this I get M1 train and M1 test. So this is what it looks like. Next, I'm just printing the M1 train and also M1 test. Means these are all the predictions made on the training data and also the predictions made on the test samples. Now, I want to use the other two models, is logistic regression and k-nearest neighbor. Here I am doing one change. Correction I am making. The decision tree classifier is basically a nonlinear classifier for which you don't need to apply any sort of a data pre-processing. Whereas for k-nearest neighbor and for logistic regression, you need to do normalization of the data. Because if you see the data, age, you have a different category, different distribution of the values of age. Similarly, fair, it is a different distribution of the data. Whereas the rest of the data, you have some binary values, but these two columns, if you take, they are of different range. So if you have a different ranges of data for every attribute, it is always better to apply a normalization so that you can bring it into a 0 to 1 scale. And for that, what we are doing is, I'm importing a standard scaler package that is also available in sklearn. And using the standard scaler, if you use it for train as well as for test, that will immediately normalize the data into a range 0 to 1. And using that, I am applying a logistic regression here and getting training and test predictions. Similarly, I am applying the k-nearest neighbor on that normalized data to get model 3 predictions. And finally, what I am doing is I am putting it to data frame of the prediction available, whatever I get it for every sample. So the tested training, you have 60 rows of information is there. That is 75% of the total number of sets. So all those, so for the first sample, decision tree says the person can survive. Logistic regression also says the person can survive, but k-nearest neighbor says the person cannot survive. Similarly, for the first, second person, all the three models are saying that the person can survive. Like this, you get for all 75% of the data. Similarly, you so this is what the predictions made for the 75% of the trained data. And similarly, you use for the test predictions, you get for the rest of the 223 rows, you get the predictions. So finally, you are going to use a model that is once you are done with different predictions, you have to use one model. Either you can use the same model, whatever you have used here, or a different model to make the final prediction. So I'm using the logistic regression as the final to see what is the combined accuracy. So if I do that, so this is what a model is, the logistic regression. A model fit, I'm going to fit a model based on the predictions and the training, and then I am evaluating the score on the test predictions. I got 72% accuracy. Individually, if you see these models individually, the logistic regression or the k-nearest neighbor or decision tree are having accuracy less than 72%. I'm not showing it here. I'm giving it to the participant to individually check the score. And if I use the final model, I get the same accuracy. Or even I choose a decision tree, I get the same accuracy. Means, once you have done the stacking of the predictions, you make it the final result. Either of the models you choose, it is going to give 22% of the accuracy of the data. Shall I further proceed, madam?
Yes, sir. You can proceed, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Just a caution of whether I am connected or not, just to do that only.
Yes, sir. You are connected, sir.
So blending also, yeah. So blending also, what we do is this 75% whatever we have done here. Once again, we split this into 75% of the 668 we use it for training, and 25% of the 668 we use it for validation. For that also you can use again train test split on this particular information, this particular data, so that you further divide it into train and validation sets. And using those validation sets, you can predict the model and you can evaluate that model over the test samples. So what basically the problem here in all these models is they are going to see the same training data every model is going to check. And because of this reason, more or less you are getting the same accuracies with the minor changes. Okay, so that's why this sort of ensembling may not be efficient. So people thought. Then they have come up with a better approach called bootstrap sampling. So in the bootstrap sampling, what it does is, let us say, I'll just take a simple example. So I have 5 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I randomly select one subset S1 of randomly I select some samples, one at a time. So I take, let us say, 1. So the samples I take it is with replacement. So that means I can take the 1 again. So I take the length same as the original set length and I make a sample like this. Some random samples I make it as many as possible, such that in every random sample the total length of the data items are same as the original length, but it is not the mere replication, but it is randomly selecting some of the samples either with a replacement. So this is what bootstrapping. So the bagging concept combines the results of multiple models to get generalized result, but models will give the same result since they are getting the same input. So we use a bootstrap sampling to change the inputs. So if you see here, the original data, I am making it into 5 subsets. Each subset, if you take it, they get the length same as that of the original data length, but you have a repetitions of the data. So like this, randomly selected bootstrapping will give a different sets of training data sets available. So as the training sets changes for every model to model, you get a different sort of predictions. And then you find these predictions of all these models, you get a better prediction. So using this bagging model, you can choose the, even for this data set, you can sample the random using bootstrap sampling so that you can test it for, I divide it into 5 sets such that in every set I get 150 rows of information, but those 150 rows of information are not the complete data set but a subset. Means most of the data will be repeated here. Like this, I make different 5 subsets, and over that, the model for, let us say, decision tree or the k-nearest neighbor, logical regression, or support vector machine, or any other model you choose it, you can choose. So every model has a different set of data. Because of that, will change, and your combined prediction will definitely change. This is what the bagging meta estimator algorithm. And this meta estimator will be used for both classification so if it is used for classification, we call it as a bagging classification. And if it is used for regression, call it as a bagging regression or regressor. So this bagging technique is used to, bagging is basically what bootstrap aggregating. So if you take bootstrap aggregating, BAGGING is the short form of bagging is the short form of bootstrap aggregating. Means it uses subsets to get a fair idea of the complete data set. Each subset we call it as a bag. And the bootstrap sampling, the condition is that the size of the subset created for bagging will be maybe less than the original data set. I think I made a mistake here. It is not maybe less than, it is equal to the original data set. So sorry for the mistake here. And what we do is, because in the random forest, we use less size, but in the meta estimator, we use the same size. So the steps involved, so we make multiple subsets of the data set, and then a base model, you create it on each subset. Then the model runs in parallel and are independent of each other. And finally, you can make the predictions by combining all those predictions. So this is what the meta estimator will do. A small deviation of this is random forest. So in the random forest, you have a bootstrap sampling, and from the bootstrap sampling, you have a tree. So here individually, we take a decision tree. So over the first bootstrap sample, you fit a decision tree, and using this decision tree, you do a prediction. Then you have a second bootstrap. Again, you have a second decision tree. Using the second decision tree, you get a prediction. Like this, as many bootstrap samples as you create, that many decision trees you get it. So here the model random forest, sorry, is for every bootstrap model we fit a random we fit a decision tree, and then we combine those predictions into a final output. While combining, you can think of a different model called as a forest. Every here, the random forest, you are making multiple predictions, and over every multiple prediction, those who teach data structures and algorithms, is there any participant here who teaches data structures and algorithms course? Yeah. So when we deal with the minimum spanning tree, famous minimum spanning tree problem, we generally discuss two algorithms, one called Prim's algorithm and one called Kruskal's algorithm, to generate the minimal spanning tree. So in the Prim's algorithm, we can see that the data, we select a root vertex, and from that vertex, we are going to span it so that you can generate a minimal spanning tree. Whereas a Kruskal, it uses a different concept called disjoint data sets. So it selects randomly different edges, and finally it will make a linkage of them. So this is what called forest. Means each and every tree, different trees are available. So basically in a forest you get multiple trees. So what we do is there are different trees individual available, and they are get connected with each other so that they make a connected component called minimum spanning tree. So the same concept here. We have a decision trees, different decision trees are available, and you are combining all those decision trees into one final output. So we call it as a forest. And why the randomness is? Because the randomness is given for two basic reasons. One reason, we use random bootstrap samples, and the second reason, random sampling is done at every level. Means in general, in a decision tree, when you make a decision tree, so you have some attributes, say n attributes are available. Out of these n attributes, you take one attribute as a root node, and then you develop the tree by selecting the rest of the n-1 attributes, you take it. So in order to fix which has a root node, to use a different measures of the information intrinsic split, Gini index. The different measures are there to apply it on every attribute to select the root node. Once the root node is selected, you get the tree can be further grown with respect to this root node over the rest of the attributes. So this is how we do. So the randomness is there in generating tree also. Means in a decision tree which you can use generate using either ID3 algorithm or classification and regression tree CART algorithm. What we do is we take all the n attributes and then select the root node. Whereas in random forest, what we do is out of the n, let us say I have a vertex v1, v2, and so on, v9. 9 attributes are there. So for selecting the root node, I may choose randomly v1, v3, v5, v7. Only 4 of the 9 I choose randomly. And with this, I develop. So at every node level, I choose a random selection of the attributes to generate tree. So that's why it is a random forest. So at every node, I set randomly either instead of select fixing on which attribute should be placed at every node, we select it randomly by choosing some subset of the available attributes. And because of that reason, this is called as a random forest. So to do that, what we do is we do feature sampling. Means we take some subset of the features and then choose the best split. So the basic steps involved in the random forest, you have to first create multiple bootstrap samples, and then every sample fit a decision tree, and using this decision tree, evaluate the prediction, and then aggregate all the decision trees, you get the final prediction. But the basic drawback in the random forest is all the trees are independent trees. So they do not take into account the incorrect predictions. Means if a particular decision tree, let's say in this decision tree, there is an error occurred. That error has in the subsequent things, but that process is not happening in the random forest. This is the major drawback. So what we do is once you make a prediction, we have to correct the prediction so that you can perform better. But that improvements of the by overcoming the predictions, error predictions is not possible here. Every tree is independent, so there is complete independence of all these n decision trees that are generated. That is one basic problem in the forest. So I will show the demo for the random forest. So again, the whole my life is I spend it in writing these statements, import numpy as NP, import pandas as PD, and again I use the Titanic data set, which is which already you know. This is how the data looks like. Again, I'm using train test split. So I get a random separation of the data, and then I use a decision tree classifier which is available in sklearn, and then give use the classifier and store it in the CLF, and then use that classifier to fit the data on the train test and the train Y. And then I calculate the score. I get a 98% on the train set, And if I use that over the test set, I get 75% only. Now for the same thing, I take a random forest classifier and then call that classifier and use the random forest classifier over the to fit the model. So more or less I get the same value here and use the code for testing. So one thing you can observe it here is since the decision tree has already seen this data, so I'm getting more or less the same thing. But if any other tools or if you make some decision trees, you get a slight variation. But what is most important thing is in the random forest, we get feature importances. Means I have a vast data of around 24 features available. Of all these features, which features are really helpful in making a decision? Means not all these features will be playing a efficient role in making the decision. So only features are there. So in order to see that, we get feature importances method available for the decision tree classifier or for the random forest classifier. Doing that, these are the importances of all features. But if you see like this, you don't get any idea. So what we do is we use the columns attributes and limit with this data. So you can see here age has 0.23 importance and fair also has equal importance. So p class underscore 1 attribute having 0.06. Overall, for all different features, you have a different importance available. So this you can see that these two are going to play a major role, and comparatively, these will play partially. They also contribute like P class 1, P class 2, and person. So this alone, if you once again work on, you get a different patterns. Okay. So the data set, whenever you have it available, you cannot take completely and see, and then your skill lies in finally fine-tuning the data and how to improve it. And further, how the data is available and how the distribution of the data is there and how each and every attribute is playing an important role in making the prediction, that we have to do the analysis. And that analysis, no one will teach in the class or the DP. One has to generate on their own. And for that, what we have to do is we have to see study the algorithms, study the methods available in every algorithm, and exploit those methods. So actually, my schedule is up to 12. I have hiccups here and there. That's why can I ask Usha madam to further extend for at least 10 minutes? Madam, am I?
He's left. So,
Ma'am, am I audible?
yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
Yeah. So can I further continue for some more time?
The majority of the participants have left. Participants, kindly respond. Can this be continued for another 5 more minutes? Yes, sir. You can continue, sir.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really sorry for the network issues that is happening to me today only particularly. It's the first time I'm facing this such a problem. Is my screen visible now?
Hello, sir.
Visible.
Hello, sir.
Ma'am,
Sir, your voice is breaking, sir.
am I audible?
Yes, sir. Now you are audible, but it is breaking, sir. Your voice is breaking.
Oh, now, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Now you are audible, sir.
Thank you. This is what basically the random it will do. We create multiple decision trees, and the main problem in all this is all the trees are independent of each other, and because of that, there will be no improvement of the model. So further to improve this ensemble learning, we have a method called boosting that will help overcome all these problems. And hence the AdaBoost classifier or the gradient boost method became more popular compared to all the rest of the ensembling methods. So the basic problem here is the boosting models are dependent, whereas in the random forest and all, they are not dependent. And the boosting will help to correct the errors of the previous models, and it builds sequentially. So this is what the boosting will do. Here also the first step is same. We try to divide the total data set into samples, and for every sample we fit a model. And what we'll do is from the yes, madam.
So your PPT is not visible, sir.
And it is showing already. It is sharing. Now.
No, sir, it is not visible, sir.
I have unshared it and I can share now.
Now your sharing is on, sir. Now you can, I think, share your no, you are.
Yes, ma'am.
So nothing is visible, sir, now.
But for me, it is showing. Can you see my?
Yes, sir. We are able to see your screen. I think your network is very slow, sir.
Yeah, the weather is also very bad today. We have a heavy wind and slight rain.
Okay. Sir, it is telling for us that you're.
Is it visible now?
It is telling for us that you're presenting, but screen is not visible, sir. Still, I think your net is very slow.
The problem is if I connect to another Wi-Fi, again I have to repeat the process.
No, sir. Can you switch off your video and try using that bandwidth to your this one, sir?
Yeah, I switched off my video.
Now I think that bandwidth can be utilized for presentation.
Yes, ma'am. It is showing you are presenting.
So for us also it is showing that you're presenting, but your screen is not coming, sir, for us.
Let me do once again.
That's the meeting. Sit here.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Sir, I can see your screen, sir. You try opening another tab in your screen. I can see your meeting screen. It is telling you are presenting to everyone. Yes, sir. Now your screen is
Okay.
visible, sir.
We should have done this earlier also, I think. Okay. So the boosting, what it does, I'll just, with this slide, I will do. So what the boosting will do here is, let us say this is my data set available. Okay, I have two classes. All the one class is represented with the blue plus symbol and the second class represented with the minus symbol. So when I do a model and try to fit a decision boundary for this model, I could able to, let us assume that this is the linear decision boundary I got. So that I get two regions. So in the one region, I get two pluses only, and in the other region, all the minuses are there, but these are incorrectly classified. So this is what the errors in the prediction of the some model that makes this decision boundary. So what the boosting will do is, it will see all these uncorrected predictions and give more weight to these predictions and then run the model again. So that in the second attempt, I could see this is what the decision boundary, wherein I could able to connect all these plus symbols into one region, but some minus also has come to this. So these are now incorrectly classified. So again, I give more weights to these three negative symbol points and again repeat the model. So like this, we repeat the model till either the error becomes 0 or till the stopping condition is satisfied. So this is what basically the boosting what we have seen here. So this so that in every iteration you get different model improvement over the other models. So we call these as the weak learners which are incorrectly specified. So give them more weightage so that they become connected and they become come fall into the correct region, whereas you get some more new weak learner set has come. So again you try to give more weightage to these incorrected points so that you will get finally when you take the aggregate weighted aggregation of all these different models, you get a proper decision boundary. This is what the boosting will do, and a similar concept we use it in AdaBoost classifier as well as gradient boost method. So the AdaBoost classifier is available again in the sklearn package. And I'm using another data set called diabetes data set for this example to show the means in every example I have shown different ways of reading the CSV file. Either you can have it in the your hard disk, or you can have it directly from the website by specifying the URL and then get the different attributes available. I'll store it in the names. Then I use the pandas to read the CSV file and convert that CSV file into a data frame. And then I use split the data set into X and Y, that is the labels and the attributes. This I am setting the random seed value as 7 and the number of trees 30, means I want to develop 30 different models to see. And cross I am using a 10-fold cross validation so that I can get the bootstrap sampling over each sample, the total data set split into 10 parts. And then I am using the AdaBoost classifier where I am specifying the parameters. The number of trees is 30, the random state is a seed, that is 7, which indicates that you are going to get a different random set for every bootstrap sample. And using that I am storing the model, and using that model I am using the model selection cross validation score method available in the AdaBoost classifier to check the model and the results whatever I am printing it. So I get 76% of the accuracy for this diabetic data set. So if I change this number of trees to 25 and run it again, let us see what happens, the result. I get 76.0460. So if I make it as only 10 trees, my accuracy is slightly reduced to 75. So instead of 30, let me put 60 trees. 74. This is what I said, overfitting of the data. For 30 trees, we were getting 75 or 76%. As you increase the complexity, again, you have a problem. So we have to adjust these parameters carefully in order to have the bias variance trade-off. So again, for 50 trees, I am getting 75.3. So if I reduce it to 45, I'm getting 74, it is reduced. So this is how you can adjust the parameters such that you get a better performance. So overall, the data and the models you have abundantly available, plenty of the data available, but what is required is you can simply use these models by the specifying AdaBoost classifier or random forest classifier or logistic regression, like that. Simply one can use and get the data and outputs. But what is more important is that what is the analysis you make it on the data set. And in order to make some good analysis on the data available, it is always better if you develop the algorithm as a hard code rather than simply say import logistic regression, import k nearest neighbor, or import decision tree. You know the code for the logistic regression algorithm. If you develop a code, then you can further play with the parameters and improve the model's performance. With this final note, the overall summary of the ensemble learning methods is they not only reduce the variance of the predictions, but they help the predictions better, improve the performance better than any single model. That's all, ma'am. And once again, I am really sorry for it was a good presentations overall for the first 4 days, and the last day it became like much chaos, but I'm really sorry for that. But and I'm if I have any participants, I think all the organizers only are available. So if you have any queries, please, ma'am.
We'll now start with the Q&A session. Participants are requested to post their queries in the chat box. If you have any queries, participants, please post them in the chat box. There are no queries in the chat box. So with that, we have come to the end of the morning session, forenoon session. Thank you, sir, for an insightful session on ensemble learning. It was an honor for us to have you with us as a resource person today. Thank you all the participants for your enthusiastic participation. The afternoon on deep learning applications in NLP will be delivered by Mr. Ritesh Srinivasan, Research Scientist, Philips India Limited. The session commences at 2 p.m. We request all the attendees to log in 5 minutes prior to the session. The links to join the meet will be shared on WhatsApp and email. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. And once again, I'm very sorry for the due to my network issues.
Thank you so much, Chandramouli sir.
Ma'am, Usha ma'am.